Hello and welcome, I'm Osmolovska and you're watching Head to Head with UATV. North Korea has fired several short-range missiles from its east coast amid growing tensions with Washington following a failed nuclear summit in February. To discuss this issue, we're joined in the studio today by Julia Osmolovska, international politics expert and executive director at the Institute of Negotiations. Hello and thank you for joining us.
Hello.
It is always a pleasure to have you in this studio. So let's start this discussion. The North Korea fired these missiles or projectiles. I want to hear your opinion on that. From the Hodo Peninsula in the east of the country, and these missiles flew for between 70 and 200 kilometers, landing in the Sea of Japan. If confirmed, this is the first launch since Pyongyang stopped testing an intercontinental ballistic missile in November 2017. But if confirmed, this phrase is very interesting. What do you think about this?
Yeah, you're quite right that there is a tiny but substantial linguistic difference from labeling this launch as a missile or a projectile, because in the first sense it creates, it opens a discussion about North Korea violating the commitments that had been done in last year with regard to its denuclearization process. If it is a projectile, so it means that it is not in breach with agreements reached with Southern Korea and with Americans, but it is still in violation with UN resolutions, which prohibits North Korea from doing any sort of military experiments, exercises and launches. Therefore, right now it's very interesting to observe how this fact is being commented by different countries. And given the fact that United States and Southern Korea, Japan and Russia and China very much involved in these negotiations with in this issue and negotiations with North Korea, some of them explicitly, some on distant level, but still we need to focus on comments from these particular countries in order to understand how possible trend will be developing.
So how would you evaluate the reaction from the United States and from North Korea then? I mean, the response from the North Korea.
Yes, it's interesting that in Northern Korean media it is emphasized that it is a missile. However, in American media and Southern Korea tend to interpret this as a projectile launch. And still some intelligence sources in Southern Korea admitted that they are doing a thoughtful analysis about what it was actually and how it could be then labeled before they will produce their formal reaction to what it is. However, this process of examination will take another month or two.
Well, but what do you think about this moratorium? Because as far as I understand, even if this is being named as missile, it is short-range missile and not a medium-range. So basically, it is not. It has nothing to do about this intercontinental ballistic missiles program. But is this launch an occasion that Mr. Kim is probably toying with the idea of lifting the moratorium?
Yeah, we're coming then to the geopolitical level of explanation of what's actually happening. I think that this is sort of like a teasing of foreign partners from Northern Koreans in response to the failed negotiations and meetings which happened on a top level in last several months. I mean, the meeting with the United States President Donald Trump in Hanoi, and the consequent meeting with President of Russia Vladimir Putin in Vladivostok.
Yes, so, actually it happened immediately after.
Yes, so both summits ended up with no official joint statement from America and North Korea, and respectively from Russia and North Koreans.
But the interesting fact is that North Korea wants to involve Russia into this dialogue with the United States. In your opinion, why?
I think it's not the direct target of involving Russia in this dialogue and making it trilateral dialogue. I think Kim Jong-un mostly balancing in between the two global powers, like playing two parallel games.
Global powers and global enemies.
Yes, yes. Global rivals, I think.
Right.
They tend to name themselves as such. So it means that if Kim Jong-un is not successful in progressing with Americans, so then he can show that he can go and speak to Vladimir Putin, which could be a sort of irritating factor to Donald Trump personally, who actually tabled on his personal political renommé as a successful negotiator for that.
But surprisingly, Mr. Putin supported Americans about this denuclearization of North Korea, and I would like to talk a little bit about American response and American reaction, because many experts treat this launch as significantly undercut what President Donald Trump considered his greatest accomplishment in this months-long talks with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And on the other hand, on Sunday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that North Korean test did not end the testing moratorium because it wasn't this intercontinental ballistic missile that could hit America. And in other words, what Mr. Kim did was not great, but it won't knock Washington and Pyongyang off the diplomatic path. What is your take on this position? Do you think that it is kind of weak, or why is it so diplomatic after this fire and fury of Mr. Trump?
Yeah, I think that it's very wise diplomatic response because it leaves the door open for political dialogue. However, I think on practical level, both sides understand the reality. But this is not something which could be said in public in the midst of the attempts of each side to present their relations as a sort of ways out of this deadlock, and the issue of resolving the North Korea denuclearization problem. And you were extremely right on saying that it was a bit surprising to hear Mr. Putin supporting Donald Trump in their stance on complete denuclearization of North Korea. And I think that this was something which was not very much expected to be heard for Kim Jong-un when he met Mr. Putin. And probably this was something that displeased somehow the leader of North Korea. And this summit with Russia ended up with no actually clear results.
Well, also I would like to discuss the maybe reaction from Mr. Trump, because we spoke about you before the interview. We had a conversation, and you reminded that in June there's going to be a year anniversary of this first summit held in Singapore, the successful summit between Mr. Trump and Kim Jong-un, where they basically signed the declaration about this denuclearization of North Korea. Can this stance, this wise, as you said, stance has something to do? Does it have something to do with this one-year anniversary?
Yes, I think definitely yes, because as I mentioned, Mr. Trump tabled his own political personal renommé as a successful negotiator for that. He invested a lot of his personal time, and it was presented last year as a huge historic breakthrough. And within 1 year, we see that actually no significant practical progress had been made. Therefore, it's very important for both sides, not just for Americans, but also for North Korea, to present this opportunity for further dialogue and to hint that the third summit between the two presidents is about to happen in the nearest future.
Do you believe that it will be happening?
It's very interesting, actually, because these summits usually, it's like a top of the iceberg of the bulk load of work which is done on an expert level. I mean the level of senior experts at Ministry of Foreign Affairs. However, we know that Northern Koreans are very much displeased with the personalities like State Secretary Mr. Pompeo and the Security Advisor John Bolton because of their more severe comments with regard to the dialogue with North Koreans. And they insist on replacing these persons in channels of bilateral diplomacy with Americas. And also we know that Kim Jong-un it changed completely the composition of his diplomatic team dealing with United States with bilateral relations. So therefore, I think that if we don't have these productive level of experts within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and on diplomatic level. So it's very difficult actually to hope that the third summit is just around the corner and it will be successful. So we still need to have very good, efficient work between the diplomatic circles, and we don't observe such for the time being.
I understand your point. Still, there was a statement released in mid-April from Mr. Trump that the United States is mentioning the third summit, the possibility of the third summit with North Korea. And there was a reaction from Kim Jong-un that North Korea will be ready to meet if the United States will fundamentally change its approach. I am assuming that this is after this fail in Vietnam, the talks between Mr. Trump and Kim Jong-un. And he emphasized that his patience is running out. But then in a different comment, he said that his personal relations with Mr. Trump is not that hostile as the relations between the country. So what are the true relations between the two presidents, the two leaders, in your opinion?
Well, the answer is that the two sides have at the same time different expectations from the dialogue and they have different demands for the dialogue. And on the other hand, they have something in similar, like having their personal political renomés, and it's very good for their public image as a good negotiators, both for Mr. Trump and Kim Jong-un. If we are talking about difference in expectations, what we know is that Americans are demanding much more progress in program of dismantling the plants which are enriching uran, for instance, and they think that closing just one plant is not sufficient. So North Korea should present more evidence and more progress, and the release of sanctions should be done gradually. This is the position of United States. And on the other turn, North Koreans, they want complete removal of all the sanctions, and then they would be ready to do some concessions from their side.
So basically, they cannot meet each other in their proposals and in their expectations. Let's also discuss another player in this game, South Korea. As far as I understand, the experts in South Korea are not that positive about this launch, and they're not as calm as the Americans. For example, Lee Byung-chol, a North Korea expert at the Institute of Far Eastern Studies in Seoul, stated that there may be some minor adjustments in the North behavior depending on how the U.S. responds, but in the long term it seems increasingly clear that Kim has decided to go his own way. Which way, you think?
You have to keep in mind that politicians have to speak in political terms. It means that they know the truth, but they can't reveal the whole truth.
Of course. That is why we are having these discussions, because we're trying to guess what do they think about.
Yes, and this is the pleasure of experts, that they completely independent to express their views, and the views you just cited reflects completely what is actually happening on the ground. So let me remind you that when this first historic summit between the United States and North Korea happened last year, and the analytics studied the declaration, not many of them were very much optimistic about the further progress, because the declaration was of vague political language, and it actually didn't have a sort of commitments and clear deadlines, and very neat check of responsibilities which each party should take upon themselves in order to go ahead with their commitments. So this was supposed to be developed on the level of diplomatic advisors and security advisors, and so far we haven't seen a lot of progress on this level, and as I mentioned already, there is more tensions on this level, and even personal critics about some high-level, top-level diplomats involved in this process.
Mm-hmm. But if the dialogue with the United States will not succeed, do you believe that Kim Jong-un will be ready to stop this denuclearization program and promise and continue testing this short, middle-range intercontinental ballistic missiles?
My personal guess is that he is really doing this on probably on quite a low level. And also, as I mentioned, I reflected to the comments of American observers and intelligence services that they are sure that there is not just one plant on uran enrichment in North Korea, and therefore they are not very much optimistic that the leader of North Korea has decided to get rid of all the nuclear arsenal he has. So basically, I think that we should be inventive and creative and looking for different solutions to the problem, and probably given this emphasis that both sides place on personal charisma, on personal image of the persons involved, so it's probably worthwhile to study more political, psychological portrait of Kim Jong-un, and to understand where could be this soft place which could be very responsive to the partners from Western world, and this probably would deliver much more progress if it is hit on the personal side.
This has been so interesting to talk to you. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but I am very grateful for these clear comments.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was Julia Osmolovska, international politics expert and executive director at the Institute of Negotiations. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Oles Garduk. Goodbye.